Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Youth Rights Podcast. I'm your host, Zane Miller, and today we are going to be talking about restorative justice and gun violence. And we're going to be talking about that with members of our newest node, the NYRA East Bay node. Do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hi, everybody. I'm Giselle Barajas. I am from East Oakland, and I currently attend Head Royce High School. And this,
I'm her partner, Jayla. I'm also from Oakland. I live in Oakland. I'm a junior at Head Royce School with Giselle. We're part of the Restorative Justice Club at our school. Giselle's our founder.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. I'm Xochtil, currently calling in from Los Angeles. I'm currently on a least restrictive programming tour in partnership with Courage, OICR, which is our new Office of Youth and Community Restoration, because we closed down our California State Prison. And it's been 2 official years since young people have been in their respective counties. And I'm so happy to see young people speaking up for issues that oftentimes, and because we're living in a concrete jungle that we're like really disconnected from, and the rise of AI as well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I do just want to get into, I'm talking about restorative justice and restorative justice for young people especially. What do y'all think is the importance, like the main importance of restorative justice for youth, and like why is it necessary?
I think the reason why, in my view, like restorative justice is just putting people's needs at the front of everything. Like, it's putting people's needs at the front of everything and determining what is right and wrong from there, not just looking at people as a thing, a commodity to be treated as something to be dealt with, but a person, a human being that has potential to grow into a great contributing member of society, and beyond that, just somebody who is a human being, and we all need individual things that a lot of people don't have. Like, as of right now, a lot of people don't have those basic needs, and that's where restorative justice plays a role in that, in the justice system, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like to humanize people so this doesn't become like a lot of these systemic issues we notice they're kind of in like these cyclical patterns, and we believe that restorative justice is a way to end that and to create like sustainable, tangible change within the system.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. What are the types of restorative justice policies for youth and young people that you think would be very beneficial to have in your communities?
Talking about restorative justice, it's really a way of responding when harm has been done, whether in a school setting. And I also feel like I think restorative justice across the state is starting to also be implemented more intentionally.
Mhm.
So that policy, when you speak about policy, right, oftentimes we think about criminalizing our young people in the school to prison pipeline, but restorative justice allows us to actually push back and funneling young people to those harmful systems. And it really centers healing, accountability, and actually repairing the relationship than actually pushing the person that has caused harm further into a more harmful system. And in other words, instead of just punishment. And at its core, it's really it's centering who was hurt, what do they need, how can the harm be repaired, instead of what law has been broken and what's the punishment for it. So I think those conversations are being implemented also in community-based organizations, and like I said, schools and detention facilities across the state.
Mhm. That's a good way of putting it. So yeah, going into what you talked about that school to prison pipeline, the current system, what do you think would be like the biggest flaws and issues within our current juvenile justice system that need to be addressed?
Funding. One of the things that I've experienced has been funding. I think, when we think about doing something different, there has to be a culture shift. So there's not a lot of funding, and when there is, it's only temporary. So also sustaining the continuum of these programs so the next generation can also experience them.
Mhm.
And also, like, the people who who respond to the crime scenes are police officers. And, what I've seen is that we need to fund, we need, if we're going to give resources to the police, what we need to do is so that they have the appropriate training. Because right now, they just view people as criminals and something to be dealt with, as I said earlier, and they don't actually handle situations in a humane way majority of the time. And we also need to fund those programs, those educational programs, so that we can be addressed as humans.
Yeah, I'd say definitely emphasizing like the part where you mentioned we need a cultural shift. I think
Yeah.
that's really important as well.
Yeah, and also funding like areas for places so that the youth could go and hang out, because we don't have a lot of places where we can go most of the time. It's very much so a catered to adults, and that also leads to a higher raise in crime as well, because we don't know what to do with our time.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying with that specifically because there's a lot of issues that NYRA talks about with that, and especially like business bans where it's like young people don't like when they try to go to a business, there's like age restrictions on the business. And it's like no teenagers are allowed in these businesses and stuff. And then like curfew laws are a big thing for young people, like can like get charged for being outside after a certain hour. And those types of things, it really makes it to where it kind of does put it in that situation like you were saying of just seeing young people as criminals rather than like seeing them as people. So like I know what you were saying about better funding and education for like police officers and stuff like that. So what would you feel like would be the ideal way that police officers should be responding to these issues with young people?
I right now, the pendulum is swinging, and young people aren't, due to the closure of BJJ and what I've been seeing, like young people aren't getting criminalized for staying outside. I think or curfew. I think you do when you're under probation and state surveillance, and when your community is over policed. So I think the police needs to allow community-based organizations to keep their the young people that they're working with, or the state there be some more designated funding for violence interrupters. It's not to cause more harm, but it's to reduce the harm. And the violence interrupter approach in Oakland, California, which is actually under the Department of Violence and Prevention. It uses restorative justice as a way to create more community within the schoolhouses, and more mentorship, but they're not security guards and they're not police officers. So I think also shifting, like, how do we care for and allow young people to heal, grow, and thrive, even when they're at risk to entering a harmful system.
Yeah, for sure. I know you mentioned the school to prison pipeline. Do you want to talk more about that and like what, like, kind of explain what is the school to prison pipeline and like how do young people end up in this system?
The school to prison pipeline is basically when you have punitive punishments where young people cannot stay in a classroom. They often have to write like different paragraphs. Like I just learned that at Rise in Oakland, like if you break one of their school policies, which is taking out their phone during school hours, that you have to write like 200 sentences of like why I'm not gonna do something again. To me, that's very militaristic. That's very punitive, because you didn't sit down and actually understand why that young person pulled out their phone in the first place. And that's really harmful, because if you're starting to neglect these young people's needs, you start pushing them away from the school. And oftentimes for young people, you're pushing them away into the streets. In the streets, if they catch a charge there, then that's where the pipeline starts. So you have the schoolhouse, right, to kind of create an image. You have the schoolhouse that they get pushed out into the street. So the street is that pipeline. So it literally looks like, think of it like copper pipes. It can be the schoolhouses, it can be the streets, it can be substance abuse, it can be there's problems at home, but because the schoolhouse's policy that, oh, if you're coming late for so many times, or you're gonna get truant and your family gets punished. So there isn't this holistic and wellness approach when it comes to serving students. There's like this stigma around it, and then it gets bigger, because if you don't produce good grades and you're held back, you're gonna start losing hope, and you're gonna be pushed again into a more harmful system.
And I like what you mentioned about the phone ban policy specifically because I've done a lot of writing on phone bans in schools with those really harsh penalties around them. And a lot of the times I do feel like I completely agree that the schools aren't really looking at the reason as to why the young people do the actions. They just are more focusing on punishing them. And there's been a lot of cases in the past where teachers have actually been like abusing students or acting like discriminatory towards students, and the school tried to cover it up. And the only reason the teachers faced disciplinary action was because a student recorded it on their phone and then was able to use that for evidence. So that goes back to the issue with the phone bans because we like the phones are necessary for recording abuse or like recording situations of bullying and stuff like that. But then if the schools punish young people for that, it makes it to where they feel like they don't have that ability, and it makes it to where the schools can then get away with these abuses and stuff. So I really do like what you mentioned about them, the phone ban specifically, and like a lot of
Yeah, exactly.
and a lot of harsh school policies. I mean, there's some states where just like disturbing school, quote unquote, can be a status offense, and then that can trigger like juvenile court
Yes,
intervention.
exactly.
So yeah, those are all like major issues that need to be addressed with restorative
And that's
justice.
not and that's not a restore yeah, exactly. And that's not a restorative justice approach. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, Zane, all these policies, that's not a restorative justice approach.
Mm-hmm. So, like, what would you feel would be like the ideal way for schools to implement restorative justice policies without like focusing on punitive punishment for these young people?
Yeah, I actually came from a middle school that had very strong restorative justice. The restorative justice coordinators and like violence interrupters in our communities take time to address the students and the situations and get to know and talk to the students about how they're feeling, what made them do it and not and why they did it, and so that they can have a better conversation with the person they have caused harm to and the person who has experienced that harm, to be like to feel comfortable enough to talk to them as well and have this conversation where the person who has caused harm can take that accountability and do and repair the damage they have done as best as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and figure out what they need to do in order to do that, and what the person who has been harmed needs in order to, like, they have what they need in order to move on and continue, and for both of them to prosper in the future as well. So I think that's the biggest thing, to have these conversations and have these understandings in schools first, because right now there isn't that understanding,
Mm-hmm.
is you did something wrong, I'm gonna punish you, I don't care why you did it, I don't care what made you do it, it's just like you broke it, oh well, you're gonna go.
Yeah. So I know, Giselle, you mentioned that you came from a middle school that actually had these restorative justice policies. So, like, from your actual experience of seeing these restorative justice policies, what were they looking at when there was these issues? Like, they said that they wanted to focus on, talking to the person who caused the harm and the person who received the harm and looking at how can we fix that. Like, can you give me a situation of like what that looked like and what happened there and how they actually did work on restoring this harm without being punitive with it?
Yeah, I mean, the most common example is like fights. Fights happen
Mm-hmm.
every day or on a very regular basis. But with my school, since it was so centered in restorative justice, it like was able to minimize a lot of the fights by kids talk. We talk a lot. We love talking. And we're gonna talk about, oh, this girl's getting mad at this girl's getting mad, she's gonna run up on da da da. And they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna be talking about that for a while. So if they get note of that, if they hear of a situation first occurring, they're gonna approach the person and like not like in an offensive way, but just like casually, they'll be like pulling them aside and they'll be like, "Hey, I heard this so and so. I heard this and this is going on. You wanna beat somebody up, or you wanna hit somebody. What's going on?" And they'll like try to get that understanding from the student. They'll also ask the person who could possibly get beat up and run up on and be like, "Hey, so what's this story? Like, what's happening?" To get both sides of the perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and from there they'll either be like, okay, so this is like, they'll give them essentially advice about what to go on from here to prevent the situation from happening. But if, let's say, the fight did occur, right, and they weren't able to get note of that before, they'll do what I said earlier, have conversations with that person to eventually put them in a circle where they both of them held accountability from their part of the situation. Because I mean, people fight other people for a reason, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's reasons to it, and they'll get note of that. They'll both hold accountability and essentially just repair the situation as best as possible, and what go from there what they need in order to coexist with each other essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And because we still go to the same school.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And I like what you do. I like what you mentioned about the fights because I feel like there's a lot of school policies that are like especially strict on that. I know one of them would be like zero tolerance policies, for example, which ends up making it to where, let's say, like a fight starts and one person instigates it and the other person's just defending themselves, both people could get punished equally, in a punitive way instead of actually trying to focus on restoring the issue.
With these punishments, like the fear of punishment, like that's essentially what like authority thinks is going to keep people in order, but a fear of punishment, that's not going to solve any of the root issues that's causing, for example, fights. Like just the threat of getting punished isn't solving any root issues versus like restorative justice, which is a way you can address a multitude of problems in your community.
And that's
Mhm.
like same with policing. Like policing doesn't address the root issues of anything if not they contribute to those issues, you know.
Mhm.
And that's the same with schools, with teachers over who hold authority and discriminate against students and want to punish them at any, like the phone ban, at any chance they'll get, any opportunity. And that's why we need to put resources into like violence interrupters instead, like Sochi said earlier, and also more restorative justice programs in schools and violence interrupters in schools, so we can mitigate these situations and actually get at the root cause of these issues.
Mhm. So, in your experience with your school that actually went through with these restorative justice policies, do you feel like it had like an overwhelmingly positive impact on the students in the school environment?
I would say, yeah, I mean, you can definitely feel it in the culture. Like I said, there were still fights. Fights are
Mhm.
gonna happen regardless. But comparatively to like other schools, we wouldn't have fights on a daily basis, maybe like on a weekly basis for sure. But even the fact that it wasn't on a daily basis, every single day people were getting into fights, that just shows so much how much restorative justice can prevent these situations and help people school. Like schooling should be to socialize, get to know each other, get informed, be educated, have opportunities, not a place where you should feel scared or where you can't be yourself, because you're supposed to learn about yourself, learn about history, learn about just so like what education is for. That's
Mhm.
why it's important. And in the middle school, you could definitely feel that in the culture, that kids were able to focus on their education or like just on themselves.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good that these policies were put into practice in a situation, and then they actually did seem, at least from what you're saying, to have a positive impact. But I think we can kind of go into some questions more about like the actual NYRA East Bay node and like what that would kind of look like. So
Yeah.
what is the NYRA East Bay node just like looking to focus on?
Okay. I actually had this idea that I brought to Giselle because I noticed how like large this platform was and how effective it had worked for other nodes that were started. And I was like, there's just so much potential I could do with this. And I was um looking into these other organizations, and I noticed that restorative justice was like something that was really being invested in a lot, especially recently, and especially with like the changing political climate and everything. This has like a lot of potential to change a lot of lives. And Giselle's a restorative justice leader, and I felt like our missions aligned a lot, and especially with like the community work that I've been noticing, like especially like outside of like just our head voice area, there's a lot of focus on like um youth rights and just like how there's these issues that disproportionately affect youth of color, especially. And
With it, I think policing is such a big thing in Oakland. Over policing, like just in general too, but the amount of crime, like what area we live ambulances all the time, like police sirens all the time, and just hearing that is crazy. And also like being in environments with high gun violence and also the rise of gun violence just as a nation in general too. It's
Hmm.
like how do we minimize it? How do we change the culture of the country? Like Sochi gave a bunch of examples earlier with the violence interrupters, and like we've seen it in history too. We've seen it in Oakland being done with the brown berets, but I think right now what we would like to do is first get people educated, get our people educated, and second have people who are affected should have the voices and the policies that affect them.
Yeah, definitely giving the youth a bigger platform instead of just like the all the decisions being made by the adults.
Who are detached from these situations.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And that youth representation is something that we're so passionate about because, a lot of the times youth don't have representation in politics. Like people under 18 can't vote, and then people under 25 can't run to be a representative, and it's like you can't be a senator until 30, and it's just like they really try to censor young people and like get their ideas, make it to where they can't be the ones making decisions that affect them. So, there's a lot of things that can be done to fix that. And I think one of the biggest things is like anybody can go to a city council meeting or like a school board meeting or something like that, and just like even if you're young, even if you don't get to like specifically vote on these things, you can just talk about it and just get your points of view across and just get that youth representation out there. And I think youth representation is just so important for that. Yeah, and then what do you think would be like the main types of like local advocacy that the NYRA East Bay node would be looking to do to get that youth representation out there and fix these issues?
Especially recently with the whole like situation with ICE and our president going on, we've noticed a lot of youth like coming together and trying to make like actual change and actually like, showing up and making it clear that we have a voice and that we can make an impact. And I think that seeing so much youth is like from different areas of the Bay coming together, I think that was just really inspirational and shows that we can take this to greater issues such as gun violence.
Yeah, and working with organizations like Courage, Curry, with spelled Curry with a J, that Sochi is a part of, and that's Communities United for Restorative Youth Justice, partnering with them because they are already making this change happen, this shift happen with
Hmm.
those interrupters. Sochi and a lot of other people are in the policies and are policy advocates and making sure that the youth have voices where they want to be heard, and we always need to be heard because I think youth are the people who are overlooked the most but have the most to say about it because grew up around it, and we also have family who grew up around it. Like it's just a generational thing in general, so in a way we are very informed.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And do you want to talk about like I know you said that you mentioned that you knew people who had like really deep personal experiences with these issues. Do you want to just talk about like how those issues affected them and just like kind of get people into that advocacy?
The most common ways is just like very unintentionally getting involved with like guns or anything like that just at such a young age that stays with you for the rest of your life. Like the whole like criminal justice system, like going through that once, like that changes you. And I feel like even just being criminalized so young, you're still developing. Like you don't even know who you are. Like and basically being told like, oh, you're a criminal, you did something wrong, even if that wasn't your intention. That just like changes how the world sees you. That impacts you for the rest of your life, and you're kind of just sort of again like pushed into this system, and we just want to change that so that like if you make a mistake once like when you're in middle school, that's not going to change the outcome of the rest of your life.
Yeah, and it like hinders your ability for employment, like your opportunity of employment, and also the way other people approach you.
Hmm.
It's like they're scared or something when you've already, even if you've already healed, like people still have the stigma against you, and it includes that cycle. Once somebody's marked as something, they, especially at a young age, they tend to start believing in that because after you're told something so many times, you start believing that. So you kind of go back to it. You kind of go back to the streets, to using a gun, to resorting to violence because that's how our system is set up, is like it sets up not to help you do better, but to keep you in a cage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you're involved in this, like then and guns are this much of like of your life, and your life is just at risk, and there's not our system has no way to like get you safer, and it pushes you even further and further into like gang violence and stuff like that, and there's no way out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think those super big issues with that, and especially like what you said with marking someone as like a criminal from a young age, from just like one thing. Like someone could do one thing, and then that just follows them for so long, especially when they did it at a very young age. Um, but I do think we're probably going to go ahead and wrap up. I went through the list of questions and everything. Do you have any like last thoughts do you want to give about restorative justice, gun violence, and about the NYRA East Bay node?
We need to start by reframing our minds, educating ourselves in order to reframe our society and change the laws that are affecting us and rebuild structures that keep us in these cages, like policing over policing, and start taking care of each other. And that's what we hope to start building within the youth, like taking care of each other and knowing how to do that, knowing how to get ourselves educated as well.
Yeah, and just again, like emphasizing the actually giving youth a platform. Like there's so many of these organizations invested on making change that are like that's just completely run by adults. And I feel like incorporating more in that is like one of our top focuses.
Yeah, of course. That's a great thing to focus on. The more youth representation in these things, the better, because like you said, y'all are going to be the ones that actually had to live with this, and that's affecting you. And then so you're going to have that firsthand experience to like inform the way you advocate. And I really like that. I really like the mission that y'all have set out to do with restorative justice and helping young people and giving them that platform. Yeah, thank y'all both for coming on and everything. It was great. Um, and then if anyone wants to join the NYRA East Bay node, I'll go ahead and put the flyer up on screen. They're going to start doing meetings. Anyone in the East Bay area can join and be a part of that, and then hopefully start joining this advocacy. Thanks everyone for watching the episode, and I'll see you all in the next one.